Hi, thanks for watching today. Last week, I stumbled across on YouTube a conversation, each in their home, between Conan O'Brien and Stephen Colbert, two of my favorite late night hosts. Stephen asked Conan, "So are you exercising?" Conan's like, "Well, clearly I'm not. My whole body's turning into sort of a white pudding, like tapioca." And in my laughter, a very thick theological thought hit me. And by the way, some of my most redemptive ruminations come through late night comedy. What if Conan isn't alone? What if this isn't an anomaly? That in this stay-at-home season of the coronavirus, our rhythms have been disrupted, and as creatures of habit, we need disciplines in our life. And of course, it's at the heart of what it means to be a Christian, that we are people of discipline. I mean, we're disciples. We are disciplined followers of Jesus. But I realize that as soon as I say that, for some of you, there's a visceral reaction because you have had it crammed down your throat. You got to be a disciplined person, follow all these rules, so on and so forth. And it became this burden for you. But this is where perspective is so vital. For the Christian, disciplines need to be seen as avenues through which we access God's grace. They are disciplines, in other words, of grace. Less about external behaviors and more about the internal cultivation of our soul. Or as theologian philosopher Jamie Smith put it, that it is the way, discipleship is a way that we curate our hearts, you see. That our hearts are like desert landscapes. When we practice disciplines of grace, it's a way of carving waterways in the desert landscape of our heart so that when God sends His grace, when the rain comes, it's channeled where it needs to go to help curate our heart, you see. So that perspective is really, really important. It's also important that we get very practical and develop a plan. Realistic, something that is achievable. Overachievers, beware. And think of it in terms of three areas. First of all, private devotion. It's personal discipline to help you fall more deeply in love with Jesus Christ. And let me just suggest one way of doing this. Take 1 to 3 verses of Scripture and give yourself to them. 5 minutes. Reflect, ruminate on them, inwardly digest, prayerfully thinking about this so that it intersects with your heart and helps you to curate your soul. Personal devotion, but also, Christians weren't designed to freelance our faith. It is a faith that is inextricably lived out in community. How do we do that in social isolation? We need to practice the discipline of community through digital means. And at City Church, we're talking a lot about this. So you can go to citychurch.org for ways to do this. But for instance, joining one of our city groups or focus groups or book club through Zoom, where we can practice the discipline of community. And then because we are socially isolated, something interesting is happening. Relationships are actually becoming more stressed rather than less. And maybe it's counterintuitive. You think I'm separated from people. But a lot of our relational nervous system is stressed. So we need to practice the discipline of love. And maybe go to 1 Corinthians 13, a good place to start. Take a few of those verses and do what we were talking about in terms of private devotional discipline. Get that into your soul and practice the discipline of love. In all these things, the goal is to push us to the great lover of our soul, Jesus Christ. It's not so much our great discipline. In fact, it's not that at all. It's the one who disciplined himself throughout life from start to finish, disciplining himself all the way to loving us with his full lifeblood on the cross It's pushing us in all of these disciplines to him, running into his arms that we might fall more deeply in love with him. So look, if you feel like your life spiritually and otherwise resembles tapioca pudding, let yourself be framed by the right perspective, that these are disciplines of grace, not duties that become burdens, that they are to be very practically practiced at an individual and communal level, always leading us, pushing us into the arms of the one who loved us to death through his life of discipline for us. Hey, thanks for joining. Two things before we close. First of all, look later this week for a new blog series from City Church that are reflections on a book by Tish Harrison Warren called Liturgies of the Ordinary, helping us to take the things we've talked about today into our lives very practically. And also, join me this Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time for Instagram Live. I'm real excited to have an Instagram Live conversation with my very good friend, David Bisgrove, who is a senior pastor at Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City. As the coronavirus has disproportionately impacted New York City, I'm going to have a talk with David about what's it like being on the ground there? What is it like to be a pastor in that context? It's going to be a fun and interesting time. So join us 1 p.m. City Church Instagram Live. Thanks again for joining today.